Hello everyone, in this video we are going to take a look at Happy Model's Mobula6 2024 V3, and despite that V3 name, it's being released here late in 2025. So not really 2024 at all. Weird name, I know. But this has a new camera, the Happy Model Nano 5, which I think is made by Runcam. It also has, I think, a new flight controller, not to be confused with the new X12 from Happy Model, but we'll take a look at all those things, the weight and the measures. But first, speed run. It weighs 17.56 grams on my scale, and I know everyone's going to want to compare it to the Air 65. Keep in mind, my Air 65 is the original prototype version, which had a different board as well as an external receiver, and it also had a light leak problem on the back of the PCB, and that one weighs just about 17 grams flat. This is the version with the canopy that would break on us. The camera is the new Nano 5. I suspect that's made by Runcam. The flight controller is the new G473 all-in-one flight controller, which features a 400 milliwatt VTX as well as Express LRS receiver built right into the board. The flight controller does not have a USB-C. It's got a little adapter JST connector, so it comes with this little dongle, which is USB-C. Battery connector is a 30, but BT20 batteries will work as well. By example, I will plug a BT20 in just now and show you all good. The motors are 0702 28,000 kV motors, and on the motors are HQ 31mm props, and they're described, what's it, these? It's the MMX3 GRPC 1mm shaft size props. It also comes with an extra canopy and a little accessory kit with some more props, screwdriver, prop remover that doesn't work, and some motor screws and a couple of black screws for mounting your canopy. And it does come with 2 sheets of stickers. Who could tell me what quad that is? You may have noticed when I was showing the canopy that I did have the mount point or the screw that adjusts our camera angle at the third from the lowest spot, so to speak. So it's actually kind of in the middle as far as how much you can raise the camera angle. So this is a new camera, and that might be the most important part. You know, flight controllers, while they can be new and there are benefits to that, it's not necessarily something that I think we feel too much unless you're a pretty experienced pilot and you're doing lots of tuning and you're really wanting to hone in on the nth degree of tuning. Flight controllers being new usually means parts for the old flight controller that were, tried and true are no longer available, or they're becoming scarce and expensive, so they move on to new parts to make new flight controllers. Do note that this one is all solder, no connectors on this board. That includes the camera. So if you damage the camera and you want to replace it, you got to get your soldering iron out. And of course, it's a micro, so you need to have a small, fine-tipped iron. I did turn on my little Star Wars lights. They're not really Star Wars lights. They came from We Bleed FPV. I don't know if they sell them anymore, but by chance on one of my particular fly days, because this is a new camera, I thought I should turn those lights on because I was too lazy to get all my LED gates out and charge up batteries and do that whole thing. So I could just turn those 2 on, and you get a little sample of how this camera responds around a lighting like that. I thought that would be especially important for those people that go to Whoop racing events. Might be something you're keen on, because I kind of like this camera. I think the field of view, I could be wrong, so take your own opinion into this. It felt like the field of view was a little bit smaller than what I was looking for. The previous Runcam, the Nano 3 I think it was, or was it the Nano 4, that it had 2 different lenses, kind of one before the pandemic, one after the pandemic, and the one after the pandemic, the lens wasn't as good, and you got a little bit of a purple tinge. Anyways, that was one of the cameras with the original lens that I really liked for the field of view, but this one is much more crisp and clear as far as the picture inside. We're also going to look at how this flies, as well as how the camera responds outside. I'll show you a slow cruisy flight, a subsection of that which has more sunlight, and then a flight that's kind of near night, dark time. It's after 5 p.m., which this time of year is very low light. I would not try to fly anything that's not a low lux analog camera, and I certainly wouldn't try to fly a DJI camera. at least the DJI FPV cameras. I wouldn't try to fly those at all because it was dark. So we got plenty to look at, especially if you're only interested in one component versus the Whoop or not. I think a lot of people will want to know, how's it compared to the Air 65? You know, that's hard for me to draw because, again, my Air 65s are different than what they started selling shortly after they launched. You could compare it to the Wisp, which I got more recently, which is closer to stock, but the Wisp has that special sort of frame. I would say they're very comparable. But a 1 gram or half gram difference, I think it actually is, between the two. For those that are the top-end flyers, that's going to be something to very, very much consider. I think Happy Model tends to have a little longer flight time for those people that, you know, want to have the most out of each individual battery. So that's something you can consider. You know, I'm ripping around the house here, and I'm getting over 3.5 minutes. So, yeah, you know, that depends on how you treat your batteries as well, because I tend to want to land, disarm, and then have my batteries come back up close to 3.5 volts. So here we are at 3 minutes and 29 seconds. Battery's a little bit low at 344, but that's pretty dang close as it climbs up just a touch higher. Let's move outside. So this flight is a little bit overcast, but it's still reasonable. It's after 4 o'clock, so not dark, but you know, it's just, I wanted to show you another flight sample, put together as many as I can, especially when I get to fly these things over several days, because quite honestly, when it comes to whoops, I generally have to kind of pick and choose my days, because I have a lot of days where wind just isn't appropriate to be flying a whoop outside. You know, anything above 10 miles an hour, which is very, very common to have at least a 10-mile-an-hour wind. This particular day, I think, is right around that 10-mile-an-hour marker. You can see there I missed my mark on that little punch over the cabana, so I had to kind of do a twirl or something like that to make it look like that's what I intended to do, and I'm actually just bailing out of a move. But I wanted to make sure I give several flight samples as well as camera samples, which are the two kind of what I think are the most important things. So you can see PID tune, how it flies, how long it flies on the batteries that I've shown you, and you can also get several samples for the camera and the, how the lens and how it handles light and any sort of sharpness or contrast that you may or may not be looking for. I wanted to make sure that we pack as much into looking at flight footage as possible, because I think that is the most fun stuff for us in FPV is flight footage, right? We can get to the desk and talk to our blue in the face, but if we could just show it, it's always just better in my opinion. And I would always prefer to show you something than to tell you about it, because I don't necessarily trust my own opinion to match that of very many people, because we're all different. So how could it possibly match? So outside flights, because you're going to be using more throttle, of course, for those that aren't familiar, you're going to be slightly shorter flight times to dramatically shorter flight times, depending upon what you're doing. And depending upon what you're doing, you may see more low battery warnings. If you didn't notice, I do change the low voltage warnings on pretty much every micro that comes to the channel. And that's just kind of what I do, because I want that warning to come on screen as an actual warning, not just because I did a punch out or I'm high on the throttle right now. So I lower that down to where it's pretty consistently going to start to be on screen, and then I know that I need to start looking towards landing so that I can hit that magic 3.5 volts that I shoot for here on the channel, to where I disarm and then we let it sit for a moment, and then it comes up to as close as we can to 3.5 volts. I don't always hit it, but that's my goal. We all have goals in life, and that's one of mine when it comes to making these videos. I don't know why I decided to go around all the posts. I bet you it's been 4 years since I've did anything like that. I think there was an old Mobula6 that I did that with, and as soon as I saw the footage, I was like, it's been years since I've done that, and why has it been years? It's kind of fun, you know, whizzing around yourself, put yourself in harm's way with a tiny little protected, you know, 17-gram whoop. It's always a good time. You can see there at the lower left where my battery voltages were down below 3.5 volts, down below 3.3 a little bit. When we get higher on the throttle, we're going to come into land. As you can see there, I do a little punchy over that tree, which I shouldn't have done. And now my battery's really going to be barking at me as I hustle into land. Oh no! Killing my batteries! No, no, no! Oh, you can probably barely notice the difference, but this is actually after 5 p.m. 5:15, which is after official sundown for my area this time of year. And I was pretty impressed by the low light capability, and I think you can kind of tell it's a little bit darker. You can see my neighbor's lights across the back fence, and you could probably actually here in a moment see their Christmas lights as well. I took my flight camera, and that's how I get flight audio. I have a cell phone on a little tripod sitting on the table. I say that quite often, but sometimes people miss it. So and then I mix that into the edit to where you can hear the quad, and I think it makes the flight more fun to watch and be a part of as well. But I did take that camera and kind of pan around afterwards. I'm not going to show that because I just think our cell phone cameras, you know, those, what are cell phones these days? That one is an older one, so I think I probably got it off of, you know, used eBay or something for $400 or something like that. But if it were to be a new one, you know, $1,200 cell phone, those cameras are pretty advanced, and that's a lot of money that are inside of those cameras. So I don't think it's a fair comparison, and they always do better than the naked eye. So I think that's the problem I have when I try to show low light performance, is that if it's not dark to where, you know, you could just take a picture and you see nothing but stars, doing anything less than that, it always shows better than it is to the naked eye. So this is part of the video where you just have to kind of trust me that it was pretty dark, and I wouldn't have flown any other camera that wasn't low light. The HD0 Lux camera also does very well in this sort of lighting, or any camera that wasn't meant for nighttime moonlight sort of stuff. Any other standard camera, even on the high definition video systems outside of the Lux, you know, and a few specialized low Lux analog cameras that might be around, I wouldn't be even trying this flight. I got home from work and I thought, you know, it's nice. The winds is way down. It's not terrible cold. I should head out and try to get a few packs in. And I was able to get actually 4 flights before I thought, you know, it's unreasonably dark now. Better shut it down. And that was actually this one that I'm using in this video. This is the last flight of the evening for me, as we finally get over 2.5 minutes. And I also thought these flights were they're enjoyable for me because they show everything that the quad can do in my hands, versus, you know, taking something that might be clipped up highlight reel. I never do that, by the way, if you're not familiar with the channel. It's always full flights, except for the sample, like the speed run, which is kind of a teaser, because it's something I do to push myself, my own skill sets, and I think it's fun. It also means that I crash these things a lot, so I get a durability sense of the quad. I do that at the end of my inside flying, which, you know, 50 packs or so inside is really easy to get that. And then I have somewhere between 4 and 8 packs I'll do speed runs on and get a whole bunch of crashes in. And then I'll take a fun segment of my speediest flying inside. And as you can see there, we tumble off the table to finish out our flight at almost 3 minutes there. So the damage report is nothing. I didn't damage or lose a prop. I will tell you something about the props. At least when mine came to me, the props were real up high. Now, if you are an experienced whooper and you have tuned for your props to be up high, Newbie Drone does this, I believe, then there is a difference when you shove them back down. My advice to all of you is, if you don't have something in particular you're looking for, especially if you're not really experienced flying these, shove those props all the way down. And the reason is, like, if this is your prop stem and your prop is way up here, these still give, you're going to hit these blades, and the higher the prop is on the prop stem, the more leverage it has to bend that prop stem, and now it flies wonky or doesn't fly hardly at all, versus if you shove that down, it's shoving more against the base of the stem, which is supported by the bell of the motor. So for durability purposes, shove those props down. It does fly slightly different, but most people probably won't notice. But yeah, damage report is essentially nothing. No damage anywhere. I did have some damage, sorry. Not damage to the actual, like, quad. I did have wire problems that, boy, I'm having to remember here. This motor. Oh, it's definitely this motor, because you can see where I cut the sheathing off. So one or more of these wires came off, and then another one came off while I was doing the repair. So that does happen, but with it being solder only, I think it's more important to bring that out. One of these other motors, I had a motor wire that broke off as well. I need to get my head magnifiers off to see the difference in the soldering. I think it was this one, just from the looks of the wires, that it came off and I had to solder it back on myself. Especially, you can see I've kind of burned the frame down here when I was doing my soldering as well. I got a little sloppy and got things down in there, but that's the only damage I have, and that could be a deal breaker for some people when it comes to soldering. As if there's no other way to get, when they go these whoops so light, they drop the motor connectors. They drop as many connectors as they can because that's just weight they can cut off with, no weight solder essentially. And so when you're driving the weight down, that's one of the things they drive. Thankfully, motors nowadays, they all have pads on the actual motors, PCBs with solder pads on them. So we can, if a wire just falls off, we can solder them back on. It is something we need to be aware of, that you need a fine tipped head. I don't know what these are called, but this is the one tip that I've been using because I do exclusively micros for the longest time. So you need to have a fine tipped head, steady hand, maybe some head magnifiers. I know many of you use them. Let me grab mine. These are my head magnifiers that I use for soldering. Of course, if you have good eyes, then you might not need these. I don't really have any complaints. I think the only thing that I have to draw out is the fact that, for those of you that might not want to solder, I've tried to stress that already quite a bit here. These repairs, when it comes to the components, it's going to be solder only. There's no way around it. The only connector you've got is for the USB. Everything else is solder. They do put a 90 degree, or is that a 180 degree connector, the A30 connector, which makes it compatible with G&B A30 batteries as well as the BT20 batteries. So you can run multiple different battery types on this particular connector, and it is pretty normal for Happy Model to use that A30. Price point. So Happy Model doesn't sell direct, so this will only be sold through resellers, and I will link down in the video description any resellers I can find that has this, but I don't know what the price point is. I'm hoping it's less than $150 because prices continue to go up, and then we have tariffs will probably be, well, depending upon where you're at and where you're buying it from, there may be a tariff component, and tariffs, because it's being imported from Happy Model to, in our case, US, there could be a tariff cost that we see at the retailer as well. So that's why I'm hoping it's under $150. Hopefully you do find it at one of those links down in the video description of under that $150 if you're interested. Of course, the Air 65 is a very good whoop as well. I think these are probably two that you're going to look at. The third one would be the Newbie Drone Race Spec, which is also a very good whoop. It's a good time to be a whooper. We have really high performing whoops from 3 different manufacturers. Of course, if you're someone who is looking for long flight times and durability, that's a completely different animal. So you have to look at maybe adding a little bit of weight when it comes to adding durability. Things like motor connectors, camera connectors, things like that. You're looking at a 19 gram or more whoop, which I can't even think of a model off the top of my head. That hasn't been very popular recently, but I'm sure there's one out there somewhere. If you have any comments, questions, suggestions, or otherwise about the Mobula6 2024 V3 released in late 2025, please let me know in the comments down below. I appreciate your time, and thanks for watching.